The 1920s promised a future of growth for the nation, and Boise was no exception. After World War I began to wind down, Americans promoted a return to normalcy and saw their lives improve. Economic prospects were strong, an artistic renaissance was well underway, and middle and upper class social life boomed. But this newfound wealth was shadowed by patterns of decline. Farmers suffered from overproduction and low prices. A collapse in demand and a rise in credit began to hurt banks. Although the warnings were present, attention was instead focused on the affluence of the post-war economy. Consequently, the Great Depression struck by surprise in 1929, catching America off guard and devastating the country. Construction came to a standstill, personal income plunged, and city life became destitute. Despite its relative isolation, Idaho was not immune to these struggles, but, like many other western states, it received abundant federal aid because of its role in farming. In Boise, the economic boom of the 20s culminated with the construction of the Hotel Boise beginning in 1929. Designed by architect Frank K. Hummel, part of the famous Tortolette and Hummel firm, the new hotel represented the introduction of French Art Deco architecture to Boise. The Art Deco style was first popularized at the 1925 Paris exhibition, which brought together more than 16 million visitors and thousands of designs from all across Europe. Consequently, Hotel Boise quickly became a classy place to stay for out-of-towners and a source of pride for locals. With 10 floors and an octagonal penthouse, residents considered Hotel Boise the city's first true skyscraper, exceeded only by the Capitol building dome in height. The hotel was crowned by a neon Hotel Boise sign, each letter measuring a massive 8 feet. Soon joined by a glut of federal building projects, construction provided optimism for the future. Ironically, none of these developments, except the hotel, would be completed until years later. The great stock market collapse of 1929, compounded by farm and real estate failure, immobilized society in Idaho and throughout the country. Even before the Great Depression struck the nation, Idaho's economy was in desperate straits. Idaho's 3 principal industries, agriculture, lumber, and mining, had undergone massive expansion during the period of high prices following World War I, but had been crippled by the Depression of 1921 and were barely alive by 1932. Although farmers had access to plenty of water through Arrow Rock Dam and the New York Canal, they had trouble staying afloat financially because of the low prices they received for their crops. A 100-pound sack of potatoes sold for $1.51 a bushel in 1919, sinking to 31 cents a bushel in 1922, and just 10 cents by 1932. To make matters worse, in 1934, Idaho suffered a severe drought, adding to the distress of low demand and prices. Demand for lumber was also nearly non-existent because building projects had been widely abandoned, and the price of silver tanked to a historic low of 24 cents an ounce in 1933. As industries began to collapse in Boise and around the country, bank holdings began to plummet. 2 of Boise's 3 banks were forced to close when farm loans lost value. Only through the actions of J. Lynn Driscoll would the 3rd bank, Driscoll's First Security Bank, be spared. Driscoll arranged for $500,000 to be secretly flown in from Salt Lake City on August 31, 1932, and announced on a sign above the bank door, "If you want your money, come and get it." Although Driscoll's efforts temporarily restored confidence in the bank, a nationwide collapse was unavoidable by 1933. Nationally, the effects of the Great Depression were not bound to the financial sector. Distress also prompted political shakeups in Washington. Anger and disillusionment with President Hoover led Franklin Delano Roosevelt to a landslide presidential victory in 1932. Ada County unexpectedly broke its long-standing Republican attitude, voting Democratic in favor of President Roosevelt. Senator William E. Borah, who had lobbied for farm support in 1928, distanced himself from Hoover, instead riding the tide of Democratic sentiment that captured the state administration and the Senate. James P. Pope, who had served as mayor of Boise from 1929 until 1933, became Borah's Democratic Senate co-worker in 1933 and emerged as a strong supporter of New Deal programs during his tenure. Political realignment would characterize Boise in a time of economic downturn and social distress. When President Roosevelt visited Boise by train in 1937, Boiseans were eager to come out and display their support. Until 1932, relief programs had traditionally been a local responsibility, but neither Boise nor Ada County had the resources available to tackle the widespread unemployment or the crumbling infrastructure caused by the Great Depression. Fortunately, President Roosevelt's New Deal programs proved wildly successful throughout Idaho, especially in Boise. Private building in commercial and residential areas had slowed to a standstill, so most construction of note in the 1930s was completed by federal agencies. Boise's population stayed stable, with the influx of employees on the government payroll as some worked locally and others passed through on their way to camps and projects around the state. The Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, emphasized productive work opportunities for unemployed young men through the conservation of lands and forests. The CCC employed over 20,000 workers to assist in conservation efforts in and around Idaho. They planted over 2.3 billion trees, spent 6.5 million man-days fighting fires, and protected 21 million acres of forest in an effort to plant new trees and to protect those already standing from disease, mainly white pine blister rust, which threatened the already fragile logging industry. CCC camps, constructed through their own efforts, helped to build lookouts, roads, picnic shelters, and trail systems. Idaho had more CCC training camps than any other state except California, and also ranked second in per capita expenditures. Their camp at Schaefer Butte helped to develop an extensive trail system, and also prompted locals to clamor for winter recreation. In 1938, a volunteer search team, which included renowned ski jumper Alf Engen, selected Bogus Basin, a location named for an 1866 mining camp and gold swindling operation, as the location for a new community ski hill. Funded by the WPA and facilitated by CCC labor, the road to Bogus was opened in 1941. Alongside the CCC, the Works Progress Administration, or WPA, worked to carry out public works projects, many of which took place in Boise. Although designed and partially constructed in 1931, the Idaho National Guard Armory, a minimalistic Art Deco structure, was substantially expanded under the WPA. The new construction added the Central Cavalry Drill Hall and the administrative offices. Built for nearly $60,000, the Armory was the largest of its kind in the state, although many additions would be added later. In 1936, WPA construction efforts took off, resulting in a new gymnasium for Boise High School, the Boise Gallery of Art, and Boise Junior High School, the first junior high school in the city. Today, all three of these buildings are still in use. The old gym hosts workout equipment and physical education classes for Boise High. The Boise Gallery of Art, now known as the Boise Art Museum, is home to permanent art collections and community events, and also showcases 20 rotating exhibits every year. Boise Junior High School, renamed North Junior High School, continues to serve as the largest junior high in the city. Like the Armory, all of these structures were constructed in the Art Deco style, which had emerged as the preeminent form of architecture of the decade, since the completion of the Hotel Boise. Its simple, geometric designs made construction straightforward, and its modern ambiance was famous nationwide. Additionally, between 1938 and 1939, the WPA helped to construct the old Ada County Courthouse. Designed in the Art Deco style with a unique exterior of white Indiana limestone on the first 4 stories, the modern building was meant to validate confidence in the government and to communicate a positive outlook for the future. The most exceptional aspect of the building, however, was inside. The WPA funded the creation of controversial murals inside the courthouse. Attributed to the well-known Depression artist Ivan Bartlett, the murals reflect the struggles of early pioneers and the evolution of justice in Idaho, even though many of the scenes were generalizations of Western life. Bartlett, who was from California, had never even visited Idaho, but had been brought on to replace Fletcher Martin, who had previously withdrawn from the project. One particularly controversial mural depicted the lynching of a Native American, despite the fact that only one such case had been documented in the history of Idaho. The mural was eventually covered by a flag after it was deemed inappropriate, but has recently been unveiled to the public, accompanied by an interpretive sign. The discussion on whether to conceal the mural or not will remain an important part of the building's history. Today, the courthouse is being renovated to serve as the law school and library for the University of Idaho. Aside from public works projects, the WPA also helped to affirm Boise's cultural needs. The Federal Writers Project, a subsection of the WPA, helped to fund written works and to support writers in Idaho during the Great Depression. Led by Idaho novelist Vardis Fisher, creative Idahoan writers published a number of guides to traveling around Idaho, including Idaho, a guide in words and pictures, the first book published in the American Guide series. Despite economic hardship, Boiseans continued to go out on the town when possible. The Boise High Theater hosted Boise Music Week, a community event established in 1918, while movie theaters such as the Egyptian and the Penny remained popular, and the McCann became an extremely popular eatery because of its low prices. As social life and economic outlooks began to improve, Boise invested in a new college to ensure future community development. St. Margaret's Hall became an Episcopal junior college in 1932 in order to provide secondary education for students who couldn't afford to travel abroad. Renamed Boise Junior College, St. Margaret's became an independent organization in 1934 and eventually found a permanent home at the former location of the Boise Airport. Statewide, the response to the Great Depression and New Deal programs was polarized. Idaho's 2 U.S. senators disagreed on the scope of President Roosevelt's New Deal. Senator Pope emerged as one of President Roosevelt's strongest supporters, whereas Senator Borah became a leading critic of the president. Federal recovery measures helped to bolster the Boise economy, but farming communities remained depressed. Although the economic downturn was discouraging, Boiseans approached the recovery effort with enthusiasm. Public construction improved short-term employment while developing tenacious cultural institutions and modern architecture. Dynamic conservation efforts helped to maintain the natural beauty of rivers, mountains, and forests throughout Idaho, while laying the groundwork for further expansion in the 1940s. Idaho, especially Boise, was ready to bounce back, but life would not emerge from the grip of the Great Depression until World War II mobilized the nation in the coming decade.